So this month, I'm focusing on prayer, specifically a new form of prayer, which I created with my dear friend Panache Desai, called Alchemical Prayer. It is a process of aligning ourselves in the consciousness of heaven through the use of the Eastern wisdom and sacred connection through the chakras, establishing particular tones and beliefs that place you in the center of the vortex of oneness. And it is there, it is in the kingdom of heaven, the upper room, the many words that point to it. It is there where that which you desire, that which is good and true and holy upon your heart is immediately made manifest. It is made manifest in spirit and in consciousness. And this process is a way to establish that clearly. And then, through the power of surrender, create that open door for it to be expressed in your life. And one of the key components, which I want to talk about today, is this thing called heaven. It deserves some attention so that we can shine the light upon that which is our broken ideas, false beliefs about this, and secure within us a knowing of what this is, how it works, and where it is. So, there's a lot of pain around this thing called heaven and hell. And truthfully, there doesn't need to be. A little bit of focus upon this can create a wonderful shift for us. A change in perception does require us to look at that which isn't working. Now, I call it the spiritual ego. The spiritual ego in us very often can just go, look at the good, only the good, only the good. And I understand that in the truth of being. But I also know about my spiritual evolution and many other spiritual paths that if we do not acknowledge what is here for it to be transformed, it doesn't actually shift. You know, the teachings in the 12-step program is the greatest example of that. Someone cannot begin the journey of moving from addiction to sobriety without the very first necessary step, which is to acknowledge that there's a problem, to acknowledge that there's something else that has a hold of them. And it is in that acknowledgement that a new opportunity begins to reveal itself. So we're going to do a little bit of that looking today. So in our childhood conditioning around heaven, you may relate to this, I'll speak for mine. It was where God lived. It was a place above the clouds, somewhere up in the sky somewhere. And it was an ultimate destination that had to be earned. That was my definition. I'm guessing you're probably like me. And the opposite of heaven, which is where, by the way, I was pretty certain I was going, was hell. That was where the devil lived. Now that was located in my training in the child mind, deep in the pit of the fires of earth, where it burned forevermore. That too had to be earned. So heaven or hell were places that in my childhood understanding were about, they happened after I died, after I laid down the body, and then which doorway I walked through really was measured upon how good I was or I wasn't. I don't know where you landed in that equation, but for me, there was some real deep conditioning that said I wasn't okay, which meant I had a bigger chance of going to hell. That's some real religious trauma. I really perceive that as a traumatic experience to those of us who suffered that kind of thought conditioning. A Course in Miracles says, an afterlife realm of eternal punishment, which is not real, yet which is the ego's goal for us. Isn't that interesting? To say, to pause and go, the ego's goal is eternal punishment, which isn't real, it isn't of God, but this is the insanity of the ego's construct. It goes on to say, in which the ego tells us awaits us after death because of all of our sins. This threat of hell is the unconscious source of all fear of our future. That's such a powerful statement. And this is why I'm pausing to really look at this. This threat of hell, conscious or unconscious, subconscious, in the subconscious world, it is the source of all fear of creating a future. So the dissolution of this idea and this fear creates for all of us a really powerful opening for power and for life to be expressed. We are shrouded in collective lies. And if you break these lies, the world becomes angry. So I want to go through a few layers of them. First layer is, I cannot be me in this world. I've got to monitor that. I've got to manage that. I've got to make sure that it's acceptable to the room I'm in, to the place I'm living, to the family system, the community system, the government system. I have to somehow, in some way, manage and control myself so that I'm not fully expressed. The layer that lives beneath that is, I'm broken. There must be something wrong with me. There must be something unacceptable. Now, this is getting into the subconscious mind layer. So we don't have these at the conscious level, but they become expressed in our world, in our relationships, in our bodies, in all that we do. Even a faint little vein of there's something wrong with me. And what lives underneath that at the core is what I talk about all the time, a belief that I'm separate from God. But I want to actually go into the center of this belief of separation from God today, because what lives in the center of that is I am guilty. I am guilty. It's a word that we don't spend a lot of time on, but it's an important one to pause and understand. Now, as I'm talking about this, you may discover your mind wandering into a pocket of, well, there's good guilt. There's the good kind of guilty where someone feels remorse or regret for what they've done. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't think we have enough spiritual depth to understand that, but I'm going to invite you to acknowledge that, put that over to the side, and stay with me as we begin to explore a different idea of what this is and how it really can cause havoc. But more importantly, where we're going to is how the freedom from it is so profound. So again, the Course says, if guilt is hell, what is the opposite? It's not a difficult question. The hesitation you may feel in answering is not due to the ambiguity of the question, but do you believe that guilt is hell? And that's where we need to pause for a moment, because I'm assuming you haven't thought about it in that way. Not enough, not to just shine the light upon it and go, feeling guilty as an underlying. Remember, in the past talks, I've talked about the guilt grid that lives in the basement of the subconscious mind, the floor of the subconscious basement, the guilt grid. And as we shine the light upon that and place our attention upon it, it's like the ghost, the big ghost that we're afraid of in the room, it will dissolve. It will begin to disappear. But the question today that's going to help us move in that direction is, do you believe that guilty equals a feeling of hell? I could also simplify it very easily for you. Do you believe that feeling separate from your natural state of goodness, your godness, would be hell? There's connection and disconnection. There's heaven and there's this sense of hell, the word I'm using to define this experience of separation. And what lives and what keeps people focused inside of that place is what I'm talking about. That's what we're talking about today. And the core of that is guilt. Course in Miracles says guilt is more than merely not of God. It is the symbol of attack upon God. This is a total meaningless concept, except to the ego, but do not underestimate the power of the ego's belief in it. This is the belief from which it stems. If you identify with the ego, you must perceive yourself as guilty. And again, we don't identify with the belief in separation consciously. The ego has a brilliant capacity of projecting it out upon the world so that all of the division and the confusion and the pain and the suffering appears out there. So it's very easy to sit back and go, I don't identify as this. And yet the very next thought or point of view is there's something wrong there. Those people are not okay. That happening is not good. These are the things that I use as my boomerangs, if you will, to boomerang me back into the center of my being and going, okay, I don't consciously conceive fully of what it means to agree that I'm guilty. I can get that. I really can. But what I also can get is that I'm not seeing a world of innocence and oneness. And I'm the perceiver and the creator of this. So that's what I have learned to use as my pointer. And I think we can all agree that in this very divisive time in our world, all of us in one way or another, at some time or another, find ourselves inside of that projection. Today, we back it up and say, what is the cause of this projection? Whatever you accept into your mind is real to you. It's your acceptance of this that makes it real. Whatever you accept into your mind is real to you, which is why when you have a belief about yourself or another, and someone comes up in the room and goes, hey, by the way, that's not even true. Inside of you, it's like, yeah, it is. It really is, because you have accepted it inside of yourself. Again, I'm using words that keep making me want to go to this to explain the subconscious acceptance of this. Because again, I'm not saying you had this conscious moment in third grade where you're sitting in your desk going, I'm going to decide to agree that I'm guilty and that there's something wrong here. This is not a conscious decision. It's a profound, deep, collective agreement in the world that we were born into. We fell asleep to our divinity. We agreed. We believed in that which was being shown us from every point of view. And that is what I mean by when we consciously accept it. We're in energetic agreement in our conditioning. And that is the spiritual work, is to invoke the presence of God and awaken to the awareness of oneness so that all of that conditioning can begin dissolving. And that's where the freedom lies. So stay with me, even if I didn't do the best way of defining this. Let's agree that guilt is our problem. Guilt, which is at the core of believing ourselves separate from our good, from our God. So what is the solution? The solution, and here's the great news, which we love here at Unity, is our holiness. This is where all of the healing lies. This is where immediate alignment becomes available. This is where everything I just described can dissolve in an instant just by focus. Focusing upon our holiness. And your holiness is the deepest truth. All of these layers I've been defining are not at all who we are. At the core of who we are is our holiness. Again, the Course says, in your holiness is the answer to every question that was ever asked, or is being asked now, or will be asked in the future. Your holiness inside of you is the answer to every single question, now, past, future, every direction, every time. Isn't that profound? Isn't that amazing? Now that deserves pause. That deserves pause to just say with me, the holiness within me inside of that contains all the answers that I need. When we begin to contemplate that, to agree to that, to crack the door open to this idea, that's when that which has always been there, your holiness, can become brighter and bigger and brighter and bigger and brighter and bigger, until you reach this point where even when the shadow of the fear reveals itself, the place where you are anchored through your spiritual practice, through your recognition of oneness, is so much more powerful. I talk about this a lot, where if you have in the mind, imagine in your brain, every thought creates a groove in the brain. And if you've had 22 million thoughts that you're not good enough, that's a pretty deep groove in the brain, isn't it? That's like a Grand Canyon groove in the brain. And then you have one tiny little thought that enters your mind. I think I'm good enough. Well, that's like a little sliver in the mind. And in comparison, the two, the one has been given so much attention and so much weight that the true statement can feel like the lie. But that is where we continue to place our attention. We just keep, I'm enough, I'm enough, I'm enough, I'm enough. And as we, feed the positive thought, and as we allow our attention to continue to go, then we fall back in the room, we get ourselves out. As we do this as a practice, as we pay attention to where the energy of thought is flowing, and we get better and better at steering it, there's a miracle that begins to occur where the belief of your worthiness becomes the Grand Canyon groove in the mind. And somehow the magic of the Holy Spirit, the miracle, I don't know what you call it, but the groove of the lie, that gets filled in. And that becomes just completely covered over to where your holiness is who you are. This exists inside of you as patterns, as agreements. But always when we become conscious and present through our spiritual practice, when we get ourselves back up to the choice point, we can begin directing ourselves towards this. And that is where all of our answers lie. It goes on to say, your holiness means the end of guilt. The acceptance of your holiness means the groove of the lies of whatever lives in there becomes, the days are numbered. It's soon to be over. And therefore, the end of the experience of hell. Your holiness is the salvation of the world and of your own. Your recognition of your holiness is what will rise up within you to lift you out of every false belief, every fear, every agreement that has been made this lifetime, past lifetimes. I don't care how you think about it. Every false idea. It is your holiness that will lift you up and dissolve those. How could you, to whom your holiness belongs, be excluded from God? How would that be possible when you yourself are the very expression of it? I'm saying all these things to get around. This is what must be deconstructed and constructed so that the experience of heaven is revealed to you. And it's no longer a geographical location out there somewhere separate from you. And it's no longer just a good idea or something that you say yes to intellectually, but yet your life is not a mirror to it. It becomes an actual experience. It becomes a known, felt something within you that becomes so solid as you move through the world that no matter what's happening in the world, you cannot deny your divinity or your connection to heaven. So to go on further to confirm where heaven is, I look to the Gospel of Thomas, which I think says it the best. It says, Jesus was speaking in the Gospel of Thomas when he says, if your leaders say to you, look, the imperial rule, heaven, is in the sky, then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, it is in the sea, then the fish will precede you. Rather, heaven is inside you and outside you. When you know yourselves, then you will be known. And you will understand that you are children of the living God. But if you do not know yourselves, then you live in poverty. And you are poverty. Oh, right there. That is the key to everything. We must know ourselves. But I'm not talking about doing another personality test to know your skills and your talents and your characteristics, which are great and they serve a purpose. I'm talking about knowing your holiness, knowing whose you are, knowing what you are, knowing from what you come. Knowing this is what establishes you inside of this connection. And where is heaven planted? In the best place of all, in the center of you, for lack of a better way to say it. There's no place other for it. It is everywhere present all the time. But it requires our awareness and our attention upon it to activate it. It's like you can be in a big, gigantic, super dark room with no light and nowhere to turn. And the light switch is right here to switch on all the light in the room. Just because you can't find the light switch or just because you can't see the light that's possible there doesn't mean it's not there. It just means you have to discover your access point. In a dark room, it's easy. You find the light switch. And the moment the light goes on, the darkness disappears. Inside of you, it's easy. You agree to your holiness and you say yes to the consciousness of oneness with God, the kingdom of heaven within you, and the light switch goes on. And we keep following that light. It is said, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. And all these things are going to be added. One of my favorite Bible quotes, because it's so clear. It's so clear. It tells us exactly where to focus, to establish and find the kingdom of heaven within us. And then it says, from there, from that consciousness, from that upper room experience of oneness, what do you want? All these things will be added. They will be an outpicturing of your consciousness. And the gift that we really, really want is that we are unattached to them. You discover that they come and go and you can make new ones, and it's just kind of a fun way to be. And it's so easy and light that when something goes, you're not bothered. You're not knocked off center because you know that you are centered in heaven. And if something goes, you can cause something else. This is the consciousness that is required for prayer to work. This is the consciousness that I'm talking about that deserves focus and practice and attention to. And when the alignment of it is established, speak the word, and it is done. So, to summarize this, there is this thing called heaven and hell. Heaven is real, hell is not real, except when you believe in it. And as we shift our beliefs, it begins to dissolve. And the core of this is the belief in separation and this thing called guilt. All of that dissolves with it. And the consciousness of heaven, the oneness with God, that which is good and true and will never disappear, becomes bigger and brighter and better and bolder and more beautiful in you. And from there, I think the whole universe says, my beloved, what do you want? What do you want to make happen inside of this field of pure potentiality? Inside of all that has been given to you. Now, I do have a, what do you call it? Not a requirement, a bias. I have a very strong opinion that the best way that this works is only if it is good and true and of your heart, and if it expands love. I believe that those are some check boxes that are required. Why? Because if it's not, you aren't in heaven. It's an obvious equation. In order to be in heaven, you have to meet those requirements. And if anything you desire on some level doesn't have that in it, well, what does that do? That bumps you out. So it gets more and more subtle and more interesting. But we can always offer that up. And we can always be expanded and curious. And as we do our prayer practice, we can stay focused and we can get interested in part of the manifestation. What's in the way? What in my consciousness must shift? What is it? And will the thing itself shift? It's such a fun place to play. It's an amazing place to play because you will experience being in the power of God that you are, which is what you want. That's what you came here to do. You came here to be fully expressed and to play and to create. And when you're doing that, you're alive. And that is the most beautiful thing of all. Let's take that into prayer. Take a deep breath with me. Welcome back, Amy and Jesse. Whoo. Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Much was shared. Much was expressed. That which is here for you, just breathe it in, accept it, let the rest go.
I am light. 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 I am light.
In this moment, we align ourselves with the truth just sung. I am light. I am the light of God, the love of God, the power of God, the presence of God. All these words point to that magnificent, miraculous light. And I know that as God is that, I am that. I am that. I am the wholeness of that power. I am the holiness of that divine presence. And as it's true for me, of course, it is true for each of us. We meet in the agreement of our divinity, of the light that we are. And as we meet in this power and in this presence, by the power of my word, I affirm that we are lifted up into the upper room, into the consciousness of heaven, into that experience of oneness where God is and I am merges into a magnificent experience of light. And that light simply says, my beloved, what do you desire? What is of your heart? What is that which is to be created, which is good and true and contributes to the expansion of light and love? And you discover, oh, that's who I am. That's what's within me. You say yes to that. Say yes to that. You don't need to know its name right now. Don't get stuck. It is who we are. And as we just say yes, as we let ourselves be lifted into the consciousness of oneness, the vortex of that spiritual presence and power, the kingdom of heaven, As we say yes to this, we allow ourselves to feel the goodness. And I affirm that all of that which is unlike it, that which is created from the insane ego's belief in separation, disappears and dissolves. It deserves no more mind as we rise up and place all of our mind into the light. I am that. I am that. I am that. I am that. Repeat that over and over and over inside of yourself as we allow the music to take us higher.
I am divinity defined. I am the God on the inside. I am a star, a piece of it all. I am light. I am light.
Yes, yes.
I am light. I am light.
That's who much you are. That's all you ever will be.
I am light. I am light.
Let this expand your heart.
I am light.
I am.
I am light.
I am that light.
I am light. I am light.
Take a deep breath. Just feel that. Feel this moment. Feel this moment of expansion. It's gentle. It is this consciousness, this connection. So grateful I say yes to this. And in gratitude, I know that all prayers are fulfilled. I know that that which is yours by right of divine appointment is established, and that the windows and the doorways of consciousness are wide open. Nothing blocking its expression in your life. I'm grateful for the fulfillment of this prayer and the consciousness in which we sit and feel in this moment. So grateful. And in gratitude, I release this prayer into the action of the law. It is done, and so it is. Amen.